To the people in Appalachia, I want you to know you are not forgotten. We continue to tell your story. We continue to scream it from every point that we can because we know you need help for years to come.
Hello, welcome to Collapse Life. I'm Zara Sethna, your host. Today, we're joined by the Executive Director of Grindstone Ministries. That's an Oklahoma based nonprofit that's been providing disaster relief since 2019. Kyle Minyard and his crew are among the incredible people stepping up to bring hope and healing to communities affected by Hurricane Helene. While the media spotlight often moves on quickly, the recovery from disasters like these takes months, if not years. And as we head into winter, this year being especially bitter so far, the needs of affected communities are greater than ever. We here at Collapse Life want to make sure that the spotlight stays on fellow Americans in need. So Kyle is here to tell us about the work Grindstone Ministries has been doing to rebuild homes, deliver critical supplies, and collaborate with like-minded ministries. Kyle, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. How are y'all this morning?
Very well, thank you. I'm really happy to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the whole story of Grindstone Ministries and how you started and the incredible work that you've been doing. So maybe let's start there. Can you start by just sharing the mission of Grindstone Ministries and how it's evolved since it began?
Certainly. So, the primary mission of Grindstone Ministries is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our might, and like unto it, love our neighbors as ourselves. Just some of our neighbors might be thousands of miles away. So, primary mission for Grindstone is pro bono disaster relief services, primarily focusing on debris removal, cleanup, and distribution of supplies post storm, tornado, hurricane, ice storm, etc. And that's pretty much where we are. Kind of the background of how we got started. TJ Morris, aka Bear Independent, came up with the idea, and he was convicted by the father to deploy down to Hurricane Michael, I believe it was, in 2019. He left here with around $300 in his pocket and come home with $300 in his pocket after serving meals for 7 to 10 days. I forget the exact number of what it was. And since then, we've deployed 45 times all across the United States. So most recently,
Wow.
returning home from Hurricane Helene.
Yeah, I want to get into what you saw there and what you're hearing about the situation now. But before we get there, just talk a little bit about the name Grindstone Ministries. What's the story behind it?
So as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Uh, it's in Proverbs. That's where the name Grindstone comes from. So we're called to keep each other sharp as men. And we have men and women, certainly in Grindstone. It's not just one or the other, but that's the background of the name. It came from, I believe, one of TJ's mentors would say it frequently, and he just adopted it and honored him with that. So
That's amazing. So you deployed 45 different times in just a short span of time, 5 years since the ministry was set up. But probably one of the most visible has been Hurricane Helene, which just happened a few months ago. So were you actually there, Kyle? Did you deploy on the ground?
yes, ma'am. So that's as executive director, my primary goal is to be the front face of Grindstone Ministries and be on the ground while we are deployed. I believe an army is led from the front, and you need to be there to lead your people and not ask them to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. So that's what I want to make sure to continue that across in my stewardship of this organization, and make sure that we instill that culture across all of our volunteers as well. So that's very
Amazing.
important to me. Spent 30 days on the ground during our Helene deployment, and just the outpouring from the Father was nothing short of miraculous. To see the things that would show up whenever He needed us to have them, anything from just say the example I like to give is I had the thought in my head I never even verbalized. We had these helicopters coming in to do drop supplies and bring people in and out. And I said, man, it would be great if we had pop-up flares and smoke grenades to signal these helicopters if we needed them. And within 30 minutes of me having that thought, a guy walked up to me that was a former Marine. He said, hey, I think you might need these, and handed me a handful of smoke grenades and pop-up flares. so we could use them
Wow.
out with our teams that were going out with the helicopters. Uh, we had an elderly gentleman that has not had his medication in 3 days. He was a diabetic, um, and he come to us, and we didn't have the supplies. And as he was there in the parking lot talking to one of our volunteers, another individual walked up and donated diabetic supplies that was his exact medicine, exact needles, exact test strips that gentleman needed. So just
Amazing.
case after case after case of that, and it gets to be overwhelming, and I think you can hear the emotion and joy in my voice, but it's just to see the Father move like that is just absolutely incredible. So
Yeah. Everything about that entire event was incredible, from the timing of it, and where it hit and how it hit. It was just incredible. And those of us who weren't there on the ground heard so many competing, conflicting reports, conspiracy theories potentially. We don't know what was going on. So I'm really happy to have you here to be able to tell us at least what you saw, because even though you were on the ground, you probably were also kept out of the loop of what exactly was happening. But tell us what you saw, and in doing so, what Grindstone was there to do.
so certainly during Helene, we were deployed to Washington County, Tennessee. We got to go to Washington County, Tennessee, via a contact that we had made in the state government. We had tried to go through the VOAD membership in the state of Tennessee, but they had never heard of Grindstone before and were giving us some pushback, uh, not really giving us a clear direction of where to go. Not that they didn't want us there from the VOAD level, but so we kind of made a workaround and contacted an individual in the state government. He then made a contact to his local state rep in the area, Tim Hicks, and Tim Hicks and I had a conversation on the phone Sunday evening as we were en route to Tennessee to deploy. We knew we were going, we just didn't know where. And so as we were driving out, having this phone conversation, we decided to go there and to Cherry Grove Baptist Church and meet Tim Hicks. And just again, by the hand of the Father, it was the perfect place for us. It was set up, it could house 200 people on cots, had a kitchen, had hot running water, had internet, had cell phone service. So it had all the things that we needed for a FOB, it had there. And it
FOB being forward
just
operating base.
absolutely forward operating base. Yes, ma'am. So whenever we deploy, we have to have a place to operate out of. Sometimes it's a parking lot in a gas station. Sometimes it's a National Guard armory. Sometimes it's a church. It's just all of the
Okay.
things that we ever need, he provides. So we got to Tennessee, um, and then uh, we had a meeting with the Craig Schweitzer there at the church, and he allowed us to use the facility. We stayed there for 30 days during our deployment, and some of the things that we saw when we first got on the ground, I had a team of 4 people with me as our recon team. Uh, we had a volunteer pilot had come as kind of one of our initial meeting contacts, and he volunteered to take up part of our team in an airplane, a small Cessna, and they were able to get up in the air and really view the damage from the air. That really painted the picture of the scope and scale of what the damage looked like. In Washington County alone, there were 171 homes wiped off the map, off the face of the earth. The water level come up approximately 65 foot from the normal river level. A major flood in that county is 8 foot above flood stage. So 8 foot above flood stage, and we're talking 65 foot. Normal water width in the Nolichucky River in Washington County is about 30 to 45 feet across, 30 to 45 yards across. Um, so we're talking 100, 150 foot. And then the water was 3/4 of a mile to a mile wide and 65 foot deep at its deepest points through that county. The water rushing through there had the effect of the finger of God wiping the soil, the trees, the rock down to the bedrock. Anything that was in its path was gone. And where it did slow down, it deposited silt. Silt deposits 10 to 15 foot deep. So it
It's
raised
incredible.
the floodplain in some areas, lowered the floodplain in others going forward. 191 homes were completely gone, uh, washed down about 25 miles to a lake where all of the debris settled out that made it that far. Um, there were uh, the things that were up in the trees, debris piles, hundreds of yards long. Horrific doesn't begin to describe it. Uh, I don't
Yeah.
know if people, some people might see this video, some people might hear our voices uh, in a podcast form, but horrific does not begin to describe the scale and scope of the disaster. Uh, in Tennessee, it was 5 counties affected. Western North Carolina, it was half the state. And it's just every nook, cranny, draw that had a creek flooded. And some were worse than others. Um, some towns got hit harder, some towns got hit less, just depending
Hmm.
on, how fast and how high the water moved. So
Yeah.
that kind of paints a
Amazing.
picture of what it looked
Yes,
like
it
there.
does. Yeah. I know we've seen pictures, but I mean, really hearing the tone in your voice right now brings it home how horrific it really was. Um, Now we're a few months out from that. Obviously, people whose entire lives were washed out are not back up on their feet. So you're not there anymore, but I'm sure that you've made contacts who keep you informed of what's going on there now. So talk a little bit about what are the ongoing needs of the people in that region right now. One of the most important reasons why we wanted to have you on is to keep this story alive in people's minds because we know that the needs have not been filled.
Correct. So I'm still in contact with several of the locals in the area, also in contact with the local governments there, just so we can continue to support them as they need. Um, right now, the biggest issue as we enter the rebuilding phase that they face is coming up against issues of on what to do with the sewer. Um, all of the infrastructure was wiped out. They're having to rebuild it and go back. They're waiting on some of the permits to be able to rebuild some of these homes so that they can have sewer access, either septic or a combined small utility system shared between several houses. Because the land is at such a premium now, uh, because of this, the soil was wiped down to the bedrock. I can't overstate that enough. What was lush farmland is now in some cases a half mile wide of just bedrock. So there's no soil there to build back on. So where they're having to rebuild the houses, and this is just a specific case. I want to reiterate, it is not across the entire river basin. Uh, where they're having to rebuild is a set of smaller area. Well, you have to have a certain amount of area to put the septic tanks on. People don't think about those things. They just think, oh, I can rebuild my house here and it'll be great. Well, there's a lot of process, a lot of, you know, red tape stuff does stand in the way. We have a set of laws in this country, and we do mostly have to follow some of them. Um, and I advise that you have a strict no felonies rule. But working with them and seeing the rebuilding process, Tennessee really embodied the volunteer state. That's their state motto.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
they are the volunteer state, and they made it actually difficult on us to find things to do because there were so many local volunteers. 7 days after the event, they were pouring the footer for the first house to be rebuilt. I would not have expected that within the first 30 days post event. So to see that and see them turn out, they made it difficult on us to find what we call targets or people to
Hmm.
help, places to assist with our field teams. Um, so we had to branch out into other areas. But it was amazing to see that. But the challenges that they face still going into winter here, uh, absolutely, there's a need for diesel, gasoline, and kerosene, propane That way they can continue to heat themselves through the winter. What I was surprised to find in all of our venturing out, the majority of these homes are electric heat only.
Wow.
I was really surprised at that, being in a cold area in Appalachia, um, that some of them had fireplaces, had no firewood, hadn't burned their fireplaces in years. Because the electric is so cheap there, they choose to
Hmm.
heat with electric over hassle of firewood or propane or anything else. So through the generous
Hmm.
donations of all of the volunteers, they had a numerous, through just Cherry Grove, which is one of about 10 distribution sites that stayed up during the what we call the relief phase of the event. Uh, I think we moved about 2.5 to 3 semi tractor trailer loads of heaters, propane, diesel, or gasoline heat to get to the kerosene, excuse me, not gasoline, heat to get out to the communities that needed it the most. So, uh, continue to supply those with the fuel that they need, getting temporary power back into those communities. Uh, One of the things that I wanted to point out that was a negative uh, was 24 hours after we got out the first batch of generators to the community that we thought were in need. Uh, those folks made the unfortunate decision and got to meet their local sheriff because they decided to post those generators, new in the box, that we had the serial numbers tracked of, on Facebook Marketplace to sell. So
Oh dear.
they got to go spend a few nights in jail. Um, so taking away, whenever we have these events, managing the resources is a huge burden, and it can't just be one person. It can't just be one group. It is a collective effort between numerous organizations to manage those resources and get the response needed to help the people. And unfortunately, there's always going to be people that are, just the bad apples in the seed, and we try to take care of that the best we can, and be the stewards that we can be of y'all's resources, and just let him judge them whenever because it's not our time to judge. So, uh,
Um, you talked about volunteers, and I know that Grindstone Ministries is fueled by volunteers. So tell us a little bit about how you recruit and train and engage your volunteers.
certainly. So, our Grindstone Ministries is primarily a volunteer-driven organization. Peer to peer, what we were able to accomplish with our near peers, as far as through our volunteer base, we were competitive. I don't know if competitive is the right word, uh, with Samaritan's Purse, Team Rubicon, Southern Baptist Disaster Convention, and those people have budgets 10x, 1,000x what ours is. Whenever we left for Helene, we had $150,000 that we could allocate to the response through our donors, and just absolutely the hand of the Father. Uh, we were able estimated our impact, direct impact, monetary on the Helene was about $10 million. So, uh, volunteer wise, we we maintain a volunteer list. Whenever we left for Helene, of about 300 individuals. When we got home, we have about 1,000. So it absolutely just the scale and scope of Grindstone grew during that deployment, and we want to continue that moving forward. So, with training our volunteers, we're going to start a training program to train our team leaders and all of our volunteers. We had our first online training the other night. Was a radio training class, because the number one lesson learned during Helene is be able to communicate, have a
Hmm.
communication plan in place. There was no cell phone service, no radio signal. Uh, it was limited for simplex because you're in the mountains, so you're limited to line of sight. So we had to establish working through the repeaters, and we made a partnership with Amron. Uh, I always butcher the name, so I just leave it at Amron. And those guys were
Okay.
incredible. They're amateur radio operators, but that doesn't really capture what they are. They're lovingly referred to as the Hammies, and they hate being
Hmm.
called that. That's what I call them. So those guys just absolutely solved our communication issues that we had. We had folks show up to cook for us. Uh,
Oh, wow.
we never wanted a meal. There was always more than enough hands in the kitchen to provide, and to cook for 200 people or 150 people at a time. That takes a lot of skill and a lot of time, and a lot of effort. Those folks would be up at 4 o'clock in the morning cooking breakfast, and they probably didn't shut down till 10 o'clock at night. Um,
Right.
our desk staff, which are just volunteers, those ladies, they were there 12 hours a day sitting at that desk, making sure we had what we needed ordered. We had the volunteers being taken in, took care of. They helped with the cleaning of the facility, and just those ladies are amazing. We want to increase our operational tempo with how often that we deploy. So
Hmm.
maintaining our volunteers and getting them trained, uh, getting the necessary skill sets in place um, as you grow an organization is difficult. So we
Yeah.
need to make sure that we maintain those trainings. And then coming up here in February, we have HAZWOPER and HAZWOPER supervisor. HAZWOPER is a 40-hour OSHA course that's required for anyone working that could be exposed to hazardous conditions. Obviously, if you're working in silt, sand, and mud, all of that come from somewhere, and who knows what it washed across. So all of that, we need to be aware of what we're working in, provide our volunteers with the proper PPE, personal protective equipment, and make sure that they have what they need whenever they come out to
Right.
help us.
Can anyone volunteer, or are you looking for people with specific skill sets during the an active kind of emergency relief?
That's a two-sided question. Yes, anyone can volunteer. If they are convicted by the Father, then we more than would love to have them come help us. Everybody can do something. If it's sit at a desk and answer a telephone, if it's answer emails, if it's wash dishes, if it's going out and picking up sticks, if it's just sitting there and praying with somebody that comes through the
Hmm.
line, uh, all of those folks are welcome to volunteer. We are onboarding a new volunteer management app called Get Connected, and that way take some of the burden off of our desk staff to make sure that they have the, a lot of the folks that were coming in had to email multiple times. Well, that creates a bullwhip effect on our desk staff of managing. They only have a certain amount of numbers they can answer emails in a day to get back
Hmm.
to people. So if folks were emailing us 3, 4, 5 times, well, that stacks up. We had 100 people email us today. They email us tomorrow. That same 100 from yesterday emailed again today, but we had another 100 email again, and it just compounds and exponentially grows the inbox. Well, it takes time to answer those.
Yeah.
Onboarding the Get Connected app will eliminate a lot of that and allow folks to schedule their self when they're available, and we have open slots to manage our resources on the ground, that we're not overwhelming. Uh, the sewer system, say, was an example during Helene. Uh, we had 150 volunteers and a sewer system that could handle about 10 showers a day. So we
Hmm.
had to watch that. Um, but we really want to manage uh, and let our volunteers know how much we appreciate them. So we're going to have some events through the year, trainings through the year, and just really focus in on growing this organization. And we can't do it without our volunteers. So
100%. Yeah. Um, but there is also a need for people with particular skills. And I remember actually hearing from you guys during the hurricane itself that you were looking for people who say had construction skills or who
certainly,
had
so
military skills. Talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
yeah, so some of the things that we needed. I'm sorry, my brain is a constant squirrel in a hamster cage, um, so I get off track pretty easy.
No,
uh,
there's lots to talk about.
Lots to talk about, and lots of things going on in my head. The skills wise that we need during deployments for our field teams, we need people that know how to talk to people, how to gather that what we call intelligence, and paint the picture of what's really going on and what the needs are. The other thing we need are people that can communicate, ham radio operators. That way we can establish a net uh, communication where there is none in an austere condition or shit hit the fan situation. Uh, like we had during Helene, there was no cell phone infrastructure. If it wasn't for Starlink, we would have had no cell phone coverage at all during the 30 days we were there.
Oh.
Uh, we also need people that can cook. We need people in the field that can run a chainsaw. And the level of chainsaw skill that you have is not, yeah, I have a chainsaw in my barn. I think it's a Steel. I think it's a Husqvarna. We need people that know what a 661 steel chainsaw with a 30-inch bar is and how to run it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Professional saw operators. We need people that know how to run a skid steer, that how to run an excavator, anywhere from 5 tons to 100-ton piece of equipment. The logistics that goes behind that, truck drivers. We need equipment operators, truck drivers, people that work on the fob as logistics that are handling the warehouse management of the donations. Uh, Believe it or not, that's probably the most important job that we have, making sure that we keep donations organized and moving in an efficient manner. The line to drop off might be 100 cars, and the line to pick up might be 100 cars. Managing that traffic flow is very important. So keeping those people in those jobs and making sure that stays up really,
Mm-hmm.
really affects how efficient we can operate.
You've talked about your plans for Grindstone in the future and you wanting to grow and deploy more. Do you have plans to redeploy back to the area where you were during Helene?
So Grindstone Ministries is a disaster relief organization. Uh, so there's relief, recovery, and resilience. Relief focuses on that initial quick reaction force, get on the ground, get them spun up, make sure everyone has a hot meal, a place to stay, that they're not out in the cold, make sure the roads are accessible, and start clearing that debris. That is the primary mission of Grindstone. So the chances for us to redeploy to the area right now are very slim because they have entered the resilience phase. They're coming through the recovery and into the resilience phase. So
Okay.
as we move forward, we probably won't be going back there. We did send a recon team recently down to South Texas, the Houston area, across to Beaumont. They had a tornado the other day. We've been in contact with state government officials there. We are currently not needed to deploy for them. We do want to increase our operational tempo, and one of the ways that we are looking to do that for Grindstone is what we call Project Endure. Project Endure is a community empowerment plan and mission that we are putting together to grow out regional teams for Grindstone. Uh, we had a small window where we looked at for Grindstone to deploy of about 500-mile radius of our base in Spiro, Oklahoma. Obviously, Eastern Tennessee is a little bit further than 500 miles from Spiro, Oklahoma. McAllen, Texas is probably a little bit further than 500 miles from
Yeah.
Grindstone's base of operations. So Project Endure will build out regional teams. We're looking for volunteers that want to take on those mantles for those regional teams and have identified a few where we're going to start. The primary mission for those will be to, as I said, love your neighbors as yourself. So folks, you see an elderly woman that has a limb down in her yard, stop and clean it, bring it to the road. Uh, Go back, see if there's anything else she needs. There's a lot of people that are alone in this world. There are a lot of people that don't have a family, that don't have community, that don't have a neighbor. So stop and check on those folks. One of the things that we did during the Marietta tornado in Marietta, Oklahoma, early this spring, was we had the local churches come together at an event that we held at the county fairgrounds, and we asked them to go out into the community and knock on every door in our town. Through that, it took them about 10 hours to knock on the doors and report back in a community of only 1,000 homes, about population about 4,000. Through that, we identified about 50 individuals that hadn't ate in 2.5 days because they had nothing in their refrigerator and no food in their house, and the power had been out. We also identified 3 people that needed home hospice care that no one had checked on in over 5 years. That was heartbreaking to see that in my own community there were people in that level of need, and that's where I was born and raised, in that town. Uh, so being able to go out and check on your neighbors, uh, we really want to empower that community empowerment through Project Endure to so people can endure in times of crisis.
So, Kyle, was Project Endure an idea that you implemented since taking over as executive director?
Yes, it is. So the Father laid on my heart this idea of building out the community empowerment. Um, how do we empower the people to love their neighbors as themselves, and how do we teach them to endure in times of crisis? One of the overarching themes of what TJ has founded is this idea and concept of it's all about saving lives, preserving life. Uh, so how do we save the lives of those that we can't individually touch ourselves? Um, and that this idea of Project Endure is teaching communities to endure through times of crisis. So it was an idea that I came up with, or the Father gave me, is what I'll give credit where credit's due. It wasn't this dumb Okie here that come up with that idea. It absolutely comes from the Father, and and how He uses that. I'll continue to be the hands and feet of that, and we lay it out here and implement the plan with these trainings, with classes online, and hope to help get people the resources that they need. We have a team in the field actually today in Gainesville, Florida, for what we call a mini deployment. A mini deployment is 1 to 3 days where a local team will go out and help people that we identify that have been lost or looked over or forgotten about by the other organizations or even by us in some cases. We recently completed the first mini deployment here in Oklahoma in Holdenville. Excuse me, Holdenville, Oklahoma. We identified a couple through a magazine article that went out that from the spring had 4 or 5 trees down in their yard. They were elderly and homebound, but they had a beautiful view out their backyard across the prairies of Oklahoma. And it was obstructed by these trees being down. Well, nobody else wanted to help them clean them up because they weren't affecting their house. They weren't, in their driveway. So we went out in about 4 hours with 4 people. We had 4.
Yes.
I'm looking off camera to Cindy to ask. I think we had 4 people. I was running a chainsaw, and about 4 hours we had those trees cleaned up. And that's the type of things that people can go do.
Right.
You know, you don't need us there to do that. Go help your neighbor. Go be the hands and feet for the Father. And it doesn't have to be through us. It doesn't have to be through anybody. You're yourself. You're a divine created entity here on this planet, put here for a purpose. Who knows what the purpose is except you?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
go do something to help
One
people.
other thing that I wanted to ask you about is, you guys and the work that you do is amazing in how you're able to respond in times of massive crisis. But we're all moving into a phase where crisis is going to happen more and more, and it's going to show up in our lives in many different ways. So, what have you guys learned from your 40 plus deployments that could help any of us to sort of be more resilient? That's kind of one of the main missions of Collapse Life is let's keep our eyes up and look ahead to what might be coming down the road, and how can we prepare in advance to be able to respond in a right way. And you've already mentioned a lot of those things, and faith being a really important one. But what are some practical things that people can do to start building their resilience now?
Certainly. So have a plan. Number one, That plan needs to include what you do, where you go, how you're going to plan on getting there, what you can do, what your skills are, and who your resources are that you can reach out to for help. Uh, sometimes it's as simple as a credit card in a hotel room, and you evacuate. If you live on the coast, go inland for a hurricane when it's coming in. Go to a hotel, spend the night, come back next day or a couple days later, and you're good. Other cases, you live in the mountains. You might get snowed in for 6 months. Well, what's your plan there? Uh, you know, 6 months might be a long time. 3 months.
Mhm.
What's your plan? Uh, do you have enough groceries? Do you have enough heat source to stay warm when it's cold?
Mhm.
We have a storm coming into Oklahoma this week. Do you have water for your livestock? If it stays below freezing for 4 or 5 days, those ponds ice up, the water troughs ice up overnight. Make sure you go out there and take care of those animals.
Yeah.
Make sure you're taking care of your pets. Make sure you're taking care of your neighbors. Make sure you have something to drink, a way to stay warm in the cold. In the spring, pay attention. Have ways to receive information.
Mhm.
If I could teach anybody anything, and I'm still in the process of learning myself, it is get your ham radio license and learn how to use it and the
Okay.
equipment to use it with. It's as simple as a Baofeng radio. A 5-watt Baofeng radio saved the community of Little Germany in eastern Tennessee. And that story has been told over and over. Um, Gordon Shell reached out with a 5-watt Baofeng on the local repeater and got help to the community that had been cut off. The
Mhm.
only access to that community was via about a foot and a half wide trail across the riverbank that you had to hike in and out of. We called, let's see, lovingly nicknamed it the Ho Chi Musk Trail because one of the first things we hiked in there was a Starlink satellite system
Mhm.
so that they had some satellite internet and learn new skills. I mean, that's something else. Don't stop learning.
Right.
I've never been an executive director before. I
Mhm.
spent 22 years in project management, oil and gas. So I, I'm coming to this learning new skills every day, and that's why it takes time.
Mhm.
Um, be humble and ask questions. Don't have that pride that says you know everything. I don't know everything. I'm just here because the Father wanted me here, and I said yeah. So
Yeah.
learn what it takes to do a job. Learn what it takes to survive. Be resilient, and learn how to endure those times of crisis.
Yeah, that's amazing advice, and I really appreciate that. So, as we draw to a close, I mentioned in the beginning that one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you is to learn more about Grindstone Ministries, but also to make sure that people are not forgetting our neighbors up in Appalachia who really just lost everything in Hurricane Helene. So, um, as we come to a close, what is your message to those people who are trying to build back their lives in that area where you were? And what is your message to the rest of the nation, the rest of the world, in terms of supporting those people?
To the people in Appalachia, I want you to know you are not forgotten. We continue to tell your story. We continue to scream it from every point that we can because we know you need help for years to come. Uh, to the people that are uh, in every other disaster this year that's happened, it wasn't just Helene. Helene just got the most media attention. Barnsdall, Oklahoma, 190 houses were wiped off the face of the planet there. Those people, that story doesn't get told. Um, but we want to tell that story. We were there for 15 days, I think, helping clean up uh, in that area in the spring. Um, Make sure that we're telling the stories of those that have been affected, get the help that they needed. And the resources are few, and the voices that are telling the stories are few. Let's make it many and many. Um, we have an overabundance of everything that we need in this country, except for people that want to volunteer whenever it doesn't matter, whenever it's not on the news, the people don't show up. So let's make sure that we're showing up. Take the time to get empowered. Uh, if you're convicted to want to do something because you're watching this, reach out to us. Reach out to Grindstone. Reach out to any organization. Uh, I'm not going to bash anybody
Mhm.
because everybody serves a purpose. Everybody has a reason to exist. And just because you don't fit in here might not mean you don't fit in somewhere else. So reach out and find where you fit in. Uh, but most importantly, ask the Father where He needs you to be, and then say yes.
Beautiful. Um, Remind people how they can find you and learn more and get involved and support your work.
Certainly. So you can reach out to us via our website, grindstoneministries.com. Reach out to us on any of the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, X. Uh, what am I forgetting? I don't know what all of them are. I have a Dudley for that. It's all just search Grindstone Ministries, YouTube. A lot of our information there. To see our fruit and what we do, go to YouTube. That really shows you what Grindstone does. We want to put forth the best face that we can. We want to be the best stewards that we can of the resources that Yah has provided us. And that's probably the best place to see it in action. Or come out and watch us. Come out and see what we do during deployments. Come visit us here in Spiro. We recently have completed our work on our Grindstone Ministries National Training Center, which is AKA formerly a church, but is now our training center. And we're happy to have that. That's such an amazing blessing and going to be such a good resource for us going forward. We recently were able to acquire a lease on a warehouse. We have it organized and have all of our equipment out of the front yard of TJ's house. And now we actually have a warehouse. So we're able to get in out of the weather, work on our equipment, maintain it. Uh, we want to continue that. So just reach out to us, come see us, email us. Our main email inbox is admin@grindstoneministries.com. You can email us there, and we look forward to seeing you. So thank you very much. I get
Thank you.
choked up every time I say it. But without our volunteers, without our donors, without people like you telling the story, we cannot continue to do what we do. And I hope to continue doing this for as long as we can, as y'all will have us. So thank you very much for allowing me to be on here today.
Oh, it's an absolute honor. We are so grateful for everything that you guys are doing and so inspired. I know that Stephen and I would love to come and see you and help out as much as we can. So we'll be in touch on that. But just thank you
Great.
so much for coming and sharing your story today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as I said, we are so grateful to Kyle and the whole team at Grindstone Ministries for all the tremendous work that they do. We're also so grateful to all of you, our audience, as well, for tuning into this episode of Collapse Life when we're so close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're watching us on YouTube right now, will you please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button? That way you'll never miss an update. And if you like what you see, tell a friend or share our content and tell them to go to collapselife.com. You can see more of our blog posts there, and you'll find links to our social media where you can engage with us on X and Facebook. We'll be back next week with more of the Thinking Person's Guide to Civilization and Demise, and we hope to see you then. In the meantime, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.